Washington, we have a brand new CNN poll for you all. That poll shows Donald Trump's lead in New Hampshire narrowing as Nikki Haley surges. The former president now at 39% of likely GOP primary voters, with Haley just 7 points behind at 32%. The rest of the field hovers at least 20 points further back in the poll taken just this week. Chris Christie is at 12%, followed by Vivek Ramaswamy and Ron DeSantis in single digits. Now, Trump is roughly where he was in the last CNN University of New Hampshire poll in November. The real change has been for Haley, who's jumped a huge 12 points since that last CNN poll, about a third of that at the expense of Ron DeSantis. So let's bring in Axios political reporter Steph Kite to discuss. We got a lot to talk about here, but specifically, Haley's biggest pickup seems to be with independent voters who the state calls undeclared and allows to vote in either primary. So as well as ideologically moderate voters, that's 43% of undeclared or independents support her, 55% of moderates. So what has Haley done in New Hampshire to win some of these new voters over?
You know, these poll results really are an indication that the Haley campaign's strategy and really focusing on New Hampshire seems to be panning out the way that they have hoped. You know, of course, Nikki has spent a lot of time in New Hampshire. Their campaign is focused, their ads in the state, and they've specifically been focusing on independent voters there. We've also seen several outside groups that have been supportive of Haley over the past few months really focus their efforts and their dollars as well on independents in New Hampshire. Of course, independent voters in New Hampshire have always played a really critical role in these primaries. They make up a large percentage of people who turn up to primaries, and so they are a key demographic, especially in this state. So it'll be, interesting to see whether Nikki can actually end up giving Trump a little bit of a contest in that state. And of course, we're also watching whether she can overperform in Iowa and perhaps overtake DeSantis there.
And yeah, it's been interesting seeing sort of where each candidate has invested a lot of their time. Ron DeSantis has invested a lot in Iowa. Nikki Haley has done a little bit of both, but Chris Christie has invested a lot in New Hampshire, but his numbers are far lower than hers. Specifically, the CNN poll shows that 65% of his supporters say they would vote for Haley if he was not on the ballot. And I can tell you, I've talked to him about some of this dynamic before, and he's pushed back and said, look, there's no guarantee all of his supporters would go to Haley. If Nikki Haley dropped out, there's no guarantee all of her supporters would go to him. That said, could this intensify the pressure that he is no doubt facing to drop out of this particular race, especially if he doesn't do well in New Hampshire?
Absolutely. I mean, we've already seen a lot of pressure on Christie to drop out in order to give that boost to Haley. They both have been running as this kind of anti-Trump alternative on the more moderate side. You know, we've seen Ron DeSantis maybe take a different approach at various points in the campaign. And so, they are pulling from the same pool of voters, especially in New Hampshire. But so far, Christie has really doubled down, seeming to indicate that he plans to stick around through the primary. But that's where I really am watching Iowa closely. If Haley is able to, surpass DeSantis in particular, if she really outperforms in Iowa as well, heading into New Hampshire, where we see her have this momentum, where we see her really coming close to the former president in the polls, that is just going to intensify that pressure on Christie to drop out and throw all the support behind Haley in order to try to provide voters a real alternative to Trump. Because of course, where things stand right now, despite the momentum behind Haley, Trump is still overwhelmingly in the lead and is still, the most likely candidate to end up with the nomination.